Hey everyone, and welcome to our Angular community meetup. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. We have an exciting session lined up to shades of Angular style guide. Whether you are seasoned Angular dev
Hey everyone, and welcome
or
to
one
NGR.
minute, okay, or just getting started. Style guide help keep our code clean, consistent, and the team friendly. And that's exactly what we will explore today. We are thrilled to welcome Jérôme Grignon, creator of Angular Caniuse and front-end engineer at Lucca and founder of Angular Devs France. Jerome bring a ton of experience and sharp E for code quality. So get ready for session packed with best practice, real world tips, and maybe a few strong options. Let's jump in and learn together. And unfortunately, I have a technical problem to show my face, so sorry for this session, but I will be online. So uh, yes, Jerome, you can start. You can share your topic.
Sure, oh, sorry, wrong one, wrong one. Okay, let me. Okay, a white screen, that's the right solution. Hello, everyone. So, the topic for today is about talking about 200 shades of style guide with Angular. 200 shades because even if we have style guide, we know that there are some difference between application and how you decide to adapt the style guide. But style guide is not something quite new in Angular. We had one for a while, and it's been there since Angular 2, and we still have this style guide. But something changed lately. Um, Something changed on the style guide in the GitHub repository. We had some positive changes, but a lot was removed. And why so? In fact, yeah, we have this style guide with a lot of topic existing in the GitHub repository and exposed on Angular.dev. So inside, you can see a lot of content about everything about styling Angular applications. So as it's introduced, it's about an opinionated guide about preferred conventions, and it's explaining some titles, just consistency across different Angular projects. It's about best practices. It's about making it easier to onboard new developers. So every project is quite about the same. It's consistent. It's about improving code maintainability and readability for the same reasons. And that's what was in the first draft of the style guide. That was the introduction stating that by not having a massive experience with Angular 2, the style guide was still a work in progress. And it explains the state of the style guide. So I was giving this talk a few weeks ago when Angular 20 was not released yet, so it was the style guide of Angular 2 was still about the same, but it changed. But at this point, when Angular 2 was released, there was this style guide and stating that it was hard to get the whole picture of what was needed. And it was introduced by something else, stating that, yeah, we had the experience with Angular 1, Angular JS, with people in the community, but for Angular 2, it was quite new. And the one who created this part, who created the draft, who created the first version of Angular style guide is John Papa. John Papa is a great content creator. He's less active in the Angular community, but created a lot of content, blog posts, talks, courses. And he was the one creating this draft of the style guide, because the style guide was firstly a community project from John. And in fact, it was not the first community project he made for Angular, and not the first, and not the only one being later merged in the official GitHub repository, because he also made Tower of Heroes. So if you learn Angular a few years ago by starting with the official documentation with Angular.io, you started with Tower of Heroes, and he was the creator of this content. And so the Angular was quite special at starting with Angular 2, because Style Guides was not just about the framework. It was about an ecosystem. A lot of content, a lot of ideas were quite new. And if you looked at the Angular documentary with people such as Misko, you understand that the challenges at creating Angular 2 was not just about a framework, but an ecosystem. And it was also about integrating TypeScript, and TypeScript was quite new. Today, you can see a lot of React projects using TypeScript, but when Angular 2 was released, it was still about JavaScript. So this style guide was not just about the internals of Angular. It was about landing in an ecosystem and having to explain what was invented. But here we are, Angular 20 was released, and it was about the time to change, to think what is the new ecosystem, what are we working within, and what is the new shape of this style guide. And so the Angular dev team created a new RFC discussion, RFC being ready for comment. So it's quite new in the Angular history to create RFC discussion. It started a few years ago, but it's quite new given the full history of Angular, but it's just quite interesting to get feedback from the community. And they had some ideas, and at this point they needed our comments. And so the main ideas was about making sure to make it really short. If you wanted to print the Angular style guide, it was about more than 50 pages. It's about simplifying the guidance, not a lot of boilerplate, making it more simple. It's about removing what is not clearly related to Angular. So if it's about basic of TypeScript, for example, it's about architecture in your application, that's something we can find somewhere else, but not in the style guide. And it was about also focusing on style choices rather than general Angular best practice. We will talk about that later on. And it was also the main point of the style guide. Angular changed lately. It changed a lot. We got signals, we got a standalone API, we had a lot of content coming, and it was required to take a step back to understand how these changes impact the style guide. And the idea was to update also all prior recommendation to really shape this style guide based on real world scenarios. And so, in fact, we could say that the breakpoint with the old style guides and new style guide is about the Angular Renaissance. It was a term used when the 17 version was released, but it was not just about this version, it was about the new energy, the new content being added to the framework. Standard API, signals, removing ng models, using the inject function, all this content where we really had a new shape of our Angular project. And so that was something that in some way is a good way to represent what is the new style guide. And so about the topics, the first one is about standards versus best practices. That's where a lot of people were struggling about understanding what are the boundaries of the style guide, what can be inside and what has to be somewhere else. Because style guide is about helping you, it's about guidance, it's about convention, but it's not about best practices. So what is the boundary? The boundary is that style guide is really about styling choices. It's really about some decisions that you can make which don't affect the performance of your application, how you are choosing the latest APIs. It's really about naming stuff. It's about organizing your folders. It's not about choosing to use on push or not, choosing to use signals or not, all these choices to use lazy loading or not. It's really about styling choices. So best practices, there are already some content in the documentation itself, and it's planned to grow this way. Best practices, we learn where the documentation, where the APIs are. Second thing is about Angular only. I told you, as I told you, there were a lot of content not really about Angular, about making some decision because Angular was still new, the ecosystem was still growing and finding its own shape. A lot of things was quite new about the web platform. So now it's about focusing about Angular. You can find a lot of content in the community. If you need to learn, if you need to retain information about web or about JavaScript, about TypeScript. So it's really about Angular. Third thing, it's quite new. It's about not using suffixes anymore. So, for example, if you add your component, so component file is suffixed by .component like .ts, and no, the new recommendation is only to be .ts. So there is not the component part anymore, and it's about the same for the class. Remove the component part of the class name. The idea is to encourage people to think about the semantic. For component, you might want to suffix with page, with details, with list, with something which is my semantic and easier to understand. It's about the same for services, to avoid user services, notification services, and by its name, not understanding what it's about. But that's a big change. That's a big change because that's not only a recommendation, because by starting a project with Angular 20, this practice will be enforced by the CLI. So if you create a new component with Angular 20, a new user profile component, you won't have the suffix on the file name and you won't have the suffix on the class name. It affects a new project with Angular 20. It doesn't affect project that you will update with the ng update because by updating from Angular 19 to Angular 20, it will update your Angular JSON to ensure that you keep the past behavior. And this behavior is enforced by this rule. So the Angular.json, if you're quite new to using this file or updating this file, you can set some default behavior for your Angular CLI command. So for ng generate, for each one, you can set some option. And they added two different options to match the new recommendation. So if you don't use these rules, you will have a new behavior, so no suffix anymore. And there are two different behavior. If that's about a component, a directive, or a service, by not using the variables, you will lose the suffix on class name and on the file name. And the only way to get it back is to use this option with type. So it's called type component, type directive, type services, but that's really about arbitrary value. So you can use type whatever you want, and you will have a whatever you want .ts. So that's really what you want to choose here. Obviously, you will use its default value. And there is something different for the other type of elements for guard, interceptor, module, but we won't we will avoid creating module anymore, and pipe and resolver. So these five elements keep as the suffix on the class name. So if you have HTTP interceptor, if you want to generate one, the class name will still be HTTP interceptor. But it's about the way that the file is named. So there is a new option which is type separator. So if you add HTTP interceptor, the file name was http.interceptor.ts, and by default without this option, it will be http -interceptor.ts. And if you want to keep the previous behavior, you can use the dot value for type separators. If you think that you should remove suffixes as a new recommendation, don't use this option. On a new project, you don't have anything to do. If you're on an old project, by moving from 19 to 20, it will have these options. You can remove it. It's your choice. On one hand, it's about being more semantic. That's a good idea. But by trying out, it can really easily lead to some conflict, because if we had a user component, it's just about a user. What about our user.ts model file? And so, yeah, sometimes having this suffix makes life quite easy. And I think that's been part of what made Angular quite successful, because we have some basics, some fundamentals that we know which file is about component, which file is about service, which file is about directory. So there might be some work to be done to improve how we name our file. But yeah, if you don't like the new suffixless way, you can use these options. That was a long part, but that's important because you can be easy to struggle about what's happening in your application if you're getting started with Angular project 20 application. If you are new to Angular and the tutorials are already changed by removing these suffixes, but for the rest of the documentation and for the rest of the community, you will find content with suffixes, obviously. And get rid of ng modules. That was obviously an expectation with the standalone API being stable for a while now. We don't want to promote ng modules anymore in the style guide. So it was an obvious choice to remove the recommendation. And so if you still have ng module in your application, you can use this command and generate to remove all your modules. So it's about 3 steps in this command. So you can choose, the first one is about moving all your directive and component to standalone, getting imports directly in your files. The second one is about removing unused ng module. So it's really about the second step, and the third one is about bootstrapping your application directly with your app component, not with the app modules. So really about a full standalone application. Then it's about template or using template URL. You have these two options, rather to reference an HTML file with the component, which is it still is the default solution. So you have a file for your HTML, a file for your CSS, and your file for your TS file. And the practice is evolved over time, over years, and a lot of people are like just using an inline template, and you can set it in your angular.json file the same way that we did for suffixes. So there was an option. So by default, your component will be created with inline template. And if you keep your template quite small, you can avoid having so many files in your application. So Angular was previously really encouraging using dedicated files, but now it's about you choose whatever you want, and we are fine with it. Next, it's about saying yes to host and class and saying no to host by the host listener, and moving a lot of content into host. So the idea is with the component, we have this host property in the component metadata, and we can set some value. We can set attribute directly. We can set class, and it's not about class dot your class name. It's also about don't use ng class, don't use the ng style anymore. In fact, it has been encouraged for a while by the Angular team, but not official, not with this tiger. It's about some social media. You could have some advices by the Angular team, but no, it's official. Don't use ng class, don't use ng style, just use class dot style dot. And you can set it also in host. And the last one is key down is an example of using directly the host listener last decorator that we were used to have in our components, so you can use it directly. And what great thing about that is that the star gallery has been released, the new star gallery has been released for the 20 version, and with the 20 version they improve this host by adding type checking, because it's still about the value of string, or at least written as string, like magic string, but now we have type checking. So if you make an error, if you make a typo, you will have a warning, and you will have auto completion on it. So it's great, really great. And it's about also saying no to hold click. Hold click has been an old practice, not used so much in Angular project, or not the one that I've been working on. It was about, yeah, okay, we have a click, an event handler, and we'll call the function on button click, on click, not using what the name of the action made by the user, because you click, but you don't care about it's a click. You don't care about the button click. You just want to know what is the real action. So if it's about saving, you can call it save. And when you're on component side, looking at the functions, it's really easier to understand what is the content rather than having on button click function being named somewhere. So that's one recommendation, but at least on my side, I never saw on button click user a lot in Angular project. And another topic is about signals. So signals know a lot of content about signal, a lot of APIs are not stable. In fact, only the one introduced in Angular 19, the resource API with resource RX resource and HTTP resource are still in developer preview, but for the rest of the signal API, event effects, linked signal to signal to observable, this one has been promoted as stable in Angular 20, so you're safe to use them, and it's about an API query into the Angular framework. So event under the hood, you can find signals. So that's why after render, after every render now, after next render and after render effect has been promoted to stable, and they use signal under the hood. You might feel like it's not about signals, but they use signals. And I think that we will see a lot of signals being used like that under the hood, not just about your application layer. And if you're wondering about what is stable or not, as he has told, I created Angular Caniuse where you can see for each feature when it's stable. So I updated the UI lately, but you can find it to understand what you can use given your current Angular application version. And so there was a RFC summary in last April to sum up the comment, sum up the decision of the Angular team based on all this community feedback. And we had some changes. It was saying goodbye to ng-file. ng-file was the idea to change the dot component part to .ng. And in fact, at the end, we don't have the suffix at all. But it was an idea they had meanwhile to help some utility, to help some library to better understand what's about Angular, what's not about Angular. So the idea was you have to use .ng extension for every file using importing Angular core package. But it's for a lot for the community to update project just for that. The value was not obvious. And so the idea nowadays without suffixes is like that. User dash profile.ts. And you can find later in template URL, style URL, the dot component extension, and so about the same for the export class. Just user profile, not anymore user profile component. Inject function. It's been a while since we had the inject function being used instead of using the constructor to inject stuff in your component services and so on. And there was no clear recommendation. It was still about you can use the constructor, you can use inject, do whatever you want or whatever you like. And now the official recommendation is using inject, which is in my mind a really good idea. And we have some content that they decided to keep. Obviously, it's about stating that consistency is important. If you have to make choices, choose consistency first before wanting to use just a new API in just one file and keeping all your project with an old API. About folder structure, they keep the same thing. It's about organize your content based on features, not based on technical content. So not make folders for components, services, and so on. You can do it. I think there is an exception because when you have nested folders, at some point you want to move your component in one file. If you have 5 components for a single page, it's easier to nest them in a components folder. But at the root of your application, avoid having a component, a services, a directive, and so on. No, this files. About file naming, so including specs, it's about the new recommendations, so use it or not. Just make sure that you're consistent in the way that you will do it. There is no migration script to move away from this suffix. So I think that it, either there might be someday a migration script, but I think that for most existing project they will keep the current way to auto component services, etc. with suffixes. There are some really basic recommendation like create all your content into the source folder file or bootstrap with the main TS. You you can think it's quite obvious because that's a default behavior, but sometimes people try to get to be exotic with the way to create application, and so in fact that's just a small mention, but it was it I think for the Angular team. Sometimes they face issues with people making some weird stuff with the application, so those standards, either you use them, or either if you have an issue, yeah, that will be your issue because you don't follow the way that Angular applications are meant to work. And keep components simple, not just component services or whatever you create in your application. Keep them simple. And at some point, if file or too big, you can move some function in utility files. You can separate your component in multiple ones, so keep stuffing. It will help to maintain your project, to test them, so it's really, really important. And the goal was not to get content not related to Angular in this style guide, just to focus about Angular. But they still added a recommendation about using protecting and read-only with TypeScript. So it's a small exception, but that's great to have it. I will share the slide, but there are a lot of interesting resources if you want to learn more about the story of the new style guide itself, or the first one from John Papa, the first RFC, the RFC summary. I have a link with a commit towards the old version of the style guide. So it's been a few weeks ago, but and the new style guide, obviously. And as he has told, I'm quite active in the community. I'm leading Angular Defense, which is an online meetup community, and we made the first French Angular conference lately with NG Baguette. If you're on the Angular Discord, you can find me because I'm there, and I created Angular Caniuse to have the community. And that's all for me.
Okay, we have a three question from the developers in the chat. So, first question from Salim Brai is how does following a style guide improve maintainability in large teams?
So I think firstly you should not just use a style guide. You should enforce it with Prettier, with ESLint, not just it's not just because there is some document somewhere stating that you should act this way or not act this way. Documentation is fine, but it won't enforce that people are using the same practices. And today I was updating a project called Angular 20 at work, and there was still some unsubscription for Eric.js with using ng on destroy with subscription rather than using destroy ref now. So if everyone uses the same practices, it will be easier to avoid having to refactor the application so at some point. And maintainability is about the style guide. It's firstly about readability. I think when you're reviewing some pure on GitHub, in fact, you can easily lose some time because that's not the good in the good name like I'm used to do for the files, or it should be private or not protected, and so on and so on. So it really helps make sure that everyone writes code in the same way. But that's really, I think NGO in this story was not a good example, but because it's more about best practices, but it's really about standards, about, yeah, in some way spelling the framework in the same way in your team.
Okay. And second question is from a username Calder is I'm having a hard time to understanding when to use the signals in Angular and when to use observables from RxJS library.
Uh, I feel dumb because I can't remind the ArcGIS creator name, Brian Lesh. Oh, I feel so stupid. Ben Lesh. Oh, sorry, Ben. And Ben Lesh, who created ArcGIS, made a tweet a few months ago stating that signals are for states and ArcGIS is for events. So if it's just about having a state in your application when you want to reactively know the value, so for example, you're changing a value in one component and you have a e-commerce web application, for example. So by clicking on the product card to add an item to your to the application basket, you want to see the modification is the header of your application because you have a small icon with a counter about the product that you added. And that's two parts of your application and it's a state. When you change a value somewhere, you want to the rest of your application to know about the value and to update. You don't care about listening the change itself. Just want your application to reactively change and update. And that's about the signal part where we use signals. But sometimes it's about event in your application. Something happened and you want to make in fact a side effect, something which will be applied. It can be about changing a value and removing a part of your application or hiding some part of your application, but like triggering a click on a button, not always the best example, but that's really about making some side effect, not just about something reactive, but about having an effect in your application. And that's where we use the observable. I think that the best example that would be that we still value the reactive form with value changes. So you have a list of items and you have a search bar, and by tapping on the search bar, it triggers an HTTP call to filter the list of items. And that's an example where that's an event. Someone click in your application and on click, you want to capture the value, to send it to the HTTP, to your API, and to get the value back. But that's really about this difference. That's important because we have effect, which can be used with Daniels uh, to act, to make them act as events. So when something change, okay, you can use the effect callback. It's like you got an event and you can act on it, but you should be careful. You can still use ArcGIS, but in my opinion, we need more clear explanation about that. I don't think I saw a lot of content explaining the boundaries between ArcGIS and signals. So if you're an expert, if you're new to Angular, that's more difficult. But I'd say that, for example, if you have behavior subject as a way to manage the state of your application, you can use Signal. No, that's one of the best examples where Signals can take some of the content, the responsibilities of RGS.
Okay, thanks. And the last question, also from a coder, why is Angular recommending to eliminate ng models? How does the standalone approach simplify Angular app architecture?
So my best way to explain that is create unit testing. And if you create unit tests before and after, you will see that it's way easier. It's way easier because unit testing was so, that's not the only topic, but unit testing was so complicated. Unit testing is about testing some part of your application, and you need to provide all the content, the context. So if you're testing a component, just a component, this component might need some inputs, for example, other components, some providers, and some directives, a lot of content. And when you're making your test, the test doesn't know about the context of your application. It only knows about what you're providing. So it doesn't know about the ng module around, about share module, about command module, about your user product module. Just know about the component that is listed into its context. So that's often the pain point when you're getting started, when you were getting started with unit testing. You start running ng test and everything break because not a single test is ready. Not a single test has all its context. And with standalone, when you import your file, your component, or your directive in a test file, it already has all its context. You might miss some providers, but most of its context is provided directly by the standalone API. So it's really easier. And I don't know if they plan to add support for non-standalone component about some features, but some features are not accessible to non-standalone components. So you can use defer, for example. You can't lazy load a component if it's not standalone. There is no host directive, which is a great feature. So you can't use it if you don't use a standalone. So ng module can be seen as an easy way to wrap everything. Like, yeah, we have this share module. We can place all our application inside, and it will work. But yeah, the issue that you are losing the control over your application to understand what is still used, what's not used anymore. And it's really about making things, giving more responsibility to your component and more responsibility to you about what is the current context of your component, and not just some wild module importing everything. I saw a good answer about it lately, stating that it's like in each component we import the whole Angular project. Like in all your components, you add all in node module from Angular. Like everything is available. Carry with that, and we'll be fine. We will be lazy, but at some point, it's fine to be lazy. But on this part, I think that it's nice to have a clean code and to know to have a clear idea of the context of your components.
Okay, thank you very much. So let's finish. Let's wrap up for today's Angular Angular meetup. Huge thanks to Jerome Grignon for sharing his expertise on Angular style guide. What a session! We hope you are walking away with practical ideas to improve your code base and collaborate more smoothly with your teams. Thanks again for being part of NG Asia. We're proud to grow this community with all of you. Stay connected, keep coding, and see you at the next meetup.